that what you're looking for?
What? Yeah. Just. I've only got one eye, I see out of it. It's not easy. Welcome to the Sturbridge Conservation Commission for the April 2nd special meeting. We have only one subject on, we have, we're talking about 71 Mashpog Road. We have a notice of intent before us, and we have already closed the hearing and will be citing the order of condition. We have, starting at the left,
Carsten Stüber.
And Germano.
Ed Goodwin,
And Eric Gaspar.
right? So I don't know how you want to roll this out, but I'm going to start with Eric,
Yeah, so Luke, I mean, I read through it quickly last week when Lauren had sent it over, and it looked like it was wordy to get to the ultimate point, which is we are allowing them to do work inside of the 200-foot buffer. Well, specifically it calls out the 50, and then jurisdictional out to the 200, solely for the purpose of removing vehicles and debris so they can adhere to their enforcement order with zoning and building, and does not provide any approvals for any ongoing or future work, but does call out specific conditions, i.e. monitoring and things like that, that would be required if a subsequent petition was brought in front of us. That was kind of what my first read was, and then upon a deeper read that it seemed to validate that. Did I get the high points there out of the 9 pages?
I think that's very well summarized. That is, I think, a perfect description of what the order is intended to do, and I believe does do as drafted.
Okay. Then, as I read it, I think it's a fine order. I don't have any concerns.
All right, Carson?
Yeah, I mean,
Laura?
I was originally wondering about whether we need all of this during construction and stuff like that, but I guess it's fine. Because it seems to just look at conditions for the general maintenance of the site rather than doing any particular work, so, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It's true that there are certainly a number of conditions in here which may not really apply ultimately to the work being proposed and approved here. Those, I think, generally, I think those all fall within the category of the typical general conditions that the commission would place on pretty much any approval. And so in these circumstances, I see no harm in including them. If ultimately they don't really apply to what is going to be done out there, that's fine, but better to be safe than sorry. That's my view on orders of conditions almost always. And certainly here, given the history, given what's proposed now, better to have the conditions in there and not need to enforce them because they don't really apply than belatedly realize you wish you had them.
Okay. I mean, basically, as far as I could see, the activity to be approved is the removal, and then number 12, which states that no other activity really is approved, right? They would have to come back. That's the most important one, and then the other conditions are just framing all of that.
Correct. That's right. You're approving what you're approving and nothing more. And for what it's worth, I would say that's always true. I think for any applicant that would ever come before you, to try to read some approval of something that's not been proposed or discussed or in the order of conditions as being encapsulated in there, I think would be disingenuous at best and not legally defensible. But yes, you're approving what you're approving and nothing more. And if and when there's a future use proposed for the site that would require them to come back to the commission, you are just making clear that there will be conditions that will apply at that time.
I mean, in this case, it's, I think, very important because the NOI was actually for something very different, so.
That's That's true. I would just add that the initial the initial notice of intent was different than what's ultimately being acted here in the order. But that's not atypical. Projects evolve during the course of a commission's proceedings and hearings. And ultimately, at your last night of hearing, the applicant's representative made very clear what exactly they were seeking approval for, and that is what is being approved here. So it's true the project evolved, but I don't see anything problematic in that.
Okay. Thanks.
Like first, like thanks to Lauren, look for like drafting this. And my comment is just in the language in one point, I think is point 12, that says this order authorizes only the activity described in this order. And I was wondering if that's clear enough, or you should say the order authorizes only the activity approved in this order. I don't know if it, because at the end of the whole description, it says activity to be approved, and that is very descriptive, that we are only approving the removal of stored vehicles within the jurisdictional wetlands. So I was wondering if like that's point 12 in the general standard conditions, if it should have extra detail in saying the activity approving this order, or like if just saying that it's describing this order focuses only in that removal of cars. It was my only language thing.
So if I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, are you asking whether condition number 12, I think it is, right, on
Yes.
page 5, standard condition number 12 on page 5 of the draft I have,
Yes.
where that first sentence says, this order authorizes only the activity described in this order, are you asking whether it would make sense to specifically call out right there precisely what is described in the order?
Either that or specify that is the activity is activity approved in this order, because the order describes a lot of things, but we are approving only the removal of cars. So I was wondering if that has to be more specific.
So you could
I
say,
think that's a fine suggestion. I think that really just nails it cold, right? So that first sentence would just be tweaked by replacing the word described with approved. I think that's a good suggestion. I'm totally comfortable with that. If that's what the commission prefers, then by all means, I would support that.
Just to be less ambiguous, like for the
Sounds good.
avoid ambiguity.
Just to clarify, I would say it's just that first sentence in 12 that we would revise that says this order authorizes only the activity approved in this order.
That is okay with.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that was all.
I have two areas that I'm concerned of. I think we should take out number 49, which is the bollards. There's no reason to have that in this activity. And to specify that the bollards are at 50 feet, or the mark, and another point, we don't know that that's what we're going to allow them to work at when they come back. So I'd like to get the 50 feet pulled out. I forget which one it is, and I'd like to get-
49.
What?
You're right, 49.
49?
Well, good news is 49's used twice, so
Yes,
we
so
just
then it's
have-
convenient.
Thanks for noting that.
Where's the other 49?
Right under
below.
it.
Oh, jeez.
Luke, thoughts on removing 49 on the boundary markers?
Yeah.
so which 49 do you want to
The
take
one
out?
Boundary
that says
markers.
Boundary markers.
Yeah, to take them.
So
My only concern
I
with
think
that
the
is-
last condition in section J on the version I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Yes.
My only
Yeah.
concern with that
That boundary
is it's
markers.
not saying it's set at the 50-foot buffer. It just says it's wetland buffer markers at 50-foot intervals. So we're not saying that we're setting it at the 50-foot, that they're being set at 50-foot intervals. We could request that it's set at the 200-foot for clarity's sake. It's the way that I read it. And they need to be every 50 feet within
You could do 25, you could do, yeah, I
We
mean,
really
it
didn't
is
agree.
vague enough that it doesn't specify.
Well, that's
that
what
this-
was in the original enforcement, or settlement agreement.
Settlement agreement, right.
Right. So,
Oh,
That's not what
you're
we
right,
do.
Eric, this doesn't say at what buffer.
Right.
It just says at 50-foot intervals, so this does not specify at the 50-foot buffer.
I mean,
So
I'm
this
fine
would
with
just
leaving
say
it
that
in or
someone's gonna do
taking it out. I don't know that it much matters because any future activity is gonna have to come in front of us and we're gonna require
Yeah.
some sort of boundary marker at that point anyway. And that's regardless of who's on this deliberative board at the time,
Well,
right? That's standard conditions.
Yep, we do that a
for
lot.
Something like this.
Yeah, but except that actually boundary markers would be kind of work that we do, right?
Right.
And that's really not something that
Is a
we
mo-
supposedly approve with this order,
Right.
right? So the question is, the installation of boundary markers would be additional work.
Well, so this is under perpetual for future activity. So that would mean if somebody comes to us to, say, propose this as a junkyard or a solar field
okay.
or
Okay,
what, housing development, whatever it is, that boundary markers would be an expectation. It doesn't specify at what wetland buffer.
but why do we need to put in,
I think part of the intention of leaving it in was because it is mentioned in the settlement, but in my opinion, I don't see harm in striking it. Luke, your thoughts on?
If the idea here, and my understanding is, I think you just mentioned, Lauren, is we're talking about a future condition, right? In the same vein of what we discussed previously, where any future applicant coming before you with a proposal is going to have to do these things. I don't think it's necessary. I guess that was, in my mind,
Right.
it made sense to have it be a little bit more vague because that's what it is. You know, in other words, it made sense to you to maybe not call out specifically where you want those boundary markers installed. If they were going to be done at some later date, that would be for a decision to be made in the future. That would make sense to me. But if the commission's inclination is to just say, let's just strike that all together, that's fine. You know, striking it out of this order is not going to preclude you from including that as a condition in a future order for other work. I guess the only thing I would mention is the reason it didn't surprise me to see it in there. Well, there were a couple reasons. First, as I think Lauren just said, it was discussed as part of the settlement agreement. It was in the notice of intent, so it was something they were proposing to do anyways. And it's just the type of condition that I'm accustomed to seeing in orders of conditions that follow enforcement orders. You know, that is to say, where you have a property owner who is, I don't know, just for example, cutting their grass far too close to the wetlands and is supposed to be leaving a vegetated buffer, but every spring and summer they're just mowing right down there. I've seen commissions routinely require boundary markers like this in an order of conditions that stems from an enforcement order, largely to educate the property owner and remind the owner and any contractors they might have or landscapers, hey, you can't cut past these boundary markers. So I think the same argument would apply here in favor of keeping it, which is just, let's just make it crystal clear to either the current owner or any future owners sort of what the limits of jurisdiction will be. But again, if we're not actually requiring this particular applicant to do it now as part of what's being approved here, I see no reason to keep it.
but we all, but any future activity will have to be approved. I mean, so that was my original kind of confusion about this whole thing, that it seems to refer to activity that's future and not approved. So
So,
Think of it this
with
way.
the-
You've written yourself a letter to be opened in the future to remind yourself of this moment today.
And with that too,
That's exactly what, it's a little breadcrumb,
Yeah,
a
but-
little
Yeah.
wink.
the order of
to remind
conditions, the order of conditions gets recorded with the Registry of Deeds. So, in theory, any future owner of this property that does their homework we'll find this order of condition in the deeds, and it also kind of gives them a set forth of, hey, if I want to do something on this property, these are things that are going to be expected of me.
Okay, but the first sentence says, prior to and during any activity on the site, beyond what was approved by the SCC in this order, the applicant shall conduct biannual groundwater. Now, given that we had this kind of NOI and the settlement agreement, this seems to kind of invite the owner to some kind of activity, but then he should have these conditions in place. What needs to be cleared is that there is no activity
Yeah.
that is approved in the future.
I'd like
That was
to,
addressed in
So,
point 12.
But we are not.
Yeah, right, it's point 12, but, okay. But the question is whether point 12 will be remembered by the time you come to point
No,
44.
But those are like different things because this is any activity. Let's say that they sell this property to a private owner and they want like to build a house and put a swimming pool. Well, these conditions of water, soil testing and that is any activity on the site. And it's going to be recorded in the deed. So whoever buys it, they will know that if I buy this property and I want to put whatever, a solar field, swimming pool, whatever, I will need like to do a water and soil testing.
But they can't put in a swimming pool before they come to us.
No, of course not.
Okay,
But they know
okay,
what they will have
okay,
to do
okay,
if they purchase
but
it.
so why do we have the conditions already in place for any future activity that we need to improve? Because
well,
that doesn't seem to make much sense.
I have a different position on this.
But I don't,
I'm not giving them the 50 feet,
right, exactly.
today, tomorrow, or the next day.
But
I'm
we're
gonna
not,
stop-
we're not in there at all.
I'm not
either.
saying that at all.
Actually, if you put it in,
It's not saying at the 50-foot buffer,
But
it's
if I-
saying every 50 feet.
then why are we arguing? Let's take it out.
Like I said on the front side, I don't have a problem removing any of those. It's more of a reminder. I think we're overcomplicating this. I look at it as this is a deliberative board sitting here on April 2nd, 2026. If on February 13th, 2030, somebody comes in front of us with
my
something,
birthday.
there you
How
go.
old will I be then?
I can probably do the math. We got another. What would it be? 87? Ed, you'll be still sitting in that chair.
Yeah,
The
right.
simple fact of the matter is, it's a reminder of the things that we have already deliberated, and we're not binding anything to anyone, but there are some indications of these are some things that we expect in the future, and it's not the only things that are expected. It's just setting a baseline for it.
Okay, so here's my question. 48. Culverts and associated roadway crossing shall be inspected annually. Any erosion, scouring, or instability must be logged and reported to the SCC. Repairs must be used stone stabilization. Okay. Does he have to now inspect all of the culverts?
No,
annually?
on any future activity. Not required to do it now. He's not required to do soil monitoring or water monitoring. He's not required to put.
Not through us, at least.
Not
They
through
still
us.
have to do the
Not
DEP.
required to
future.
put out those flags every 50 feet. None of that is required. But if a future activity comes in front of us, this is, you could pull it completely out, everything in section J, and there's gonna be no harm to this agreement, but what we're not doing is leaving a breadcrumb to future boards as to the journey that we've taken here. We spent 3 years on this at this point, so I think it would be well served to us and to our future selves to remind ourselves what that 3 years
Okay,
has led to.
The thing is, you're doing that to create a compromise. For the last 3 years.
No, we're not.
Well, let me finish,
Okay.
okay? For the last 3 years, or not all of it, but for a damn good portion of it, every time Gary walked in here, the first thing he said is 50 feet, 50 feet, 50 feet, 50 feet.
Okay,
Okay? 50 feet is not on the table from my point of view, and if I want to do it in 10 years, because I'll be older then and more mild,
You're gonna soften in the
Yeah,
next 10 years?
yeah,
Ed?
definitely.
I don't buy it.
Okay, but the point is that that's what they've been bringing, that's what they're going to bring. That's why we don't put it in there and bait them. If you want to put 200 feet in there,
50 feet is
50
the
feet
distance
is the
of the
distance
boundary
between-
markers,
No, no,
that's
no.
it.
Not
Actually,
at-
it's not the 50
Yeah.
foot, it's the wetlands.
Interval.
yeah.
It's
I-
the
I
wetland
still
where the
think we-
wetland starts and we put in
Do you
the
want to
buffer
strike
every 50
49?
What?
Do you want to strike 49?
feet. So I
do, but
want to actually remind the person that future activity refers to activity that's not yet approved and needs to come before the board.
Is that set in 12, or?
Yeah, that's set in 12, but I want the person to be reminded that he doesn't have to do it yet, but these would be conditions.
okay.
It says
But
So-
that
What- what-
doesn't make it
what-
any more legally
what-
enforceable, right? I mean, it's nice, but, I mean, the simple fact
Well,
of the
but I
matter is-
mean, given
So I
what,
can put, so for, maybe for where it says J, perpetual conditions related to future activity within the jurisdictional area, referencing any future activity not yet approved by this board.
and the other thing is, I mean, as I said in my email, so what worries me is that, I mean, I think we never should have agreed to the settlement agreement, and I will be much more careful before I do that next time. But what worries me is when, let's say, they somehow mysteriously get approval from the planning board to put back the cars in the 200 feet zone. Somehow they change their mind in another board.
Because we are the 200 feet until the.
Okay.
Yeah, so they
Now,
can let you pass by.
okay. Let me see what they are thinking from their perspective. They have a settlement agreement, right? And so they actually think that that means we can go ahead full throttle. So I just want to make sure that they don't interpret that in the wrong way. So this refers to activity that is in the imagination only, and not approved. And I mean, so in
The
that sense,
execution of this agreement, in my eyes, brings us back to zero. It brings us to
right.
everything going forward is at the 2026 and forward standard,
So-
whatever is
right,
brought
okay.
in front of us,
And so,
right?
so my
if
question is, why do you have perpetual condition for zero, which is a non-activity?
for what?
Why do you have perpetual condition for non-activities?
Because you want like to set a baseline for like the people that will continue
But,
using this. It's
but-
like
but-
if you will use this, you
Other-
will have.
If I could
By
just
the way,
offer one.
the people in the future are not bound by any of this in any case, but they can be, they can make their own conditions. So it's not binding for anybody.
Of course.
No, it's not.
That's what you're right.
Right.
But it
It's
is
a
a
reminder.
wink, it is a wink to this commission in the future as to the work that we have taken on over the past 3 years.
Right.
Now, it does not bind to them,
Right.
nor does it bind us if something's brought in front of all four of us in 6 months plus Nick, right?
But, okay, just clarify that these are activities that are not yet approved.
Yep, that's what it says future.
Yeah, but
And you know,
future
one way
acti-
we might do that, as I'm looking at these conditions in section J, the first couple start with the words prior to adjourning any activity on the site beyond what was approved by the SEC in this order. I think that does a pretty good job of addressing the issue that's just been raised. Maybe we just,
Maybe
it's,
you
of
say-
course, the lawyer's answer to add more words to it, but if
Yeah,
we
I-
just use that phrase for each condition, I think it really nails it down.
I think we need to make clear that those conditions, according to note 12, paragraph 12, they would need to be approved by any kind of commission.
Certainly, and that's, you know, again, that's always going to be true, right? You're
Right.
not creating.
I mean, it's
some
clear
new
to you.
jurisdiction
I'm
for
not so sure
commission
it's
down
clear
the
to
line.
them.
You're doing.
I don't want a misunderstanding on their part. But, yeah.
I think I talked over it. I didn't, a misunderstanding about what, I'm sorry.
I just want to just say here that these activities would have to be first approved. Again, just to clarify it. I mean, that's.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I think that's fine.
Does that make sense? And we can take out the boundary marker. But we would have to renumber them, right?
Don't have to.
If I take out that first 49, I don't need to renumber. Before I did the
not gonna
final,
lose
I was
any-
gonna go through all the formatting and everything anyway.
We were gonna leave it in. I
Take
would-
out boundary markers or leave boundary markers?
I think we should put them,
I'd like to take them out.
take them out.
I'm fine either way.
Yeah.
Like, I think it,
Crossing off boundary markers.
Stalled at every feet, but we don't really, is it a wetland boundary marker, or is it a 50-foot setback boundary marker, or what boundary marker is it?
We have little signs, but
Wetland, right at the wetland?
depends on the project. Sometimes we do them at the 50-foot no structure, sometimes we do them at the 25.
Remember on
It
Cedar
depends on the
Street, we
project.
just had them.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have them put them on the trees. We wanted something more permanent. In
Right.
other cases, we've had them put, you know.
But my point is they're doing work to clear an area and take cars out, and you're saying boundary markers. Where are the boundary markers? Where are they in this project?
Future activity,
It,
future boundary markers.
Did the,
Yeah.
Where are they in the future? Where are they
Depends
gonna
on the
be?
project.
depends on the project.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it goes,
see, I think
if
we
we
should
don't
take
have a
that out.
wetland delineation, then we may require a new one.
You might put them at 200 feet depending on what it is,
Right.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think we should take it out for this.
okay.
I'm not gonna lose any.
I already
sleep over
crossed it
taking
off, so.
Yeah.
Did you have another question too, or was that the second one?
Anything else we need to go through here? It looks really good.
Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to provide a waiver for work within the 25-foot no-touch zone for DEP file number 1224.
second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Eric Gaspar in favor?
Ed Goodwin in favor?
Saint Germain in favor.
Carsten Stuber in favor.
Four.
With regards to the project at 71 Mashapog Road, DP file number 1224, I'd like to make a motion to approve the project under the Wetland Protection Act for the order of conditions discussed here this evening.
Which would include the removal of 49, number
Yes.
1, and what, and.
And the adjustment to line 12.
Right.
Second.
Any, yep, go ahead. Any discussion? No? All in favor?
Eric Gaspar in favor?
Ed Goodwin in favor?
Saint Germain in favor.
Carsten Stuber in favor.
Great.
With regards to the project at 71 Mashapog Road, I'd like to make a motion to approve the project under the Sturbridge Wetland Bylaw with the order of conditions discussed here this evening and the adjustments discussed here this evening.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Eric Gaspar in favor?
Ed Goodwin in favor?
Saint Germain in favor.
Carsten Stuber in favor.
Bingo.
All right, Karsten, you can do your thing.
Huh? Oh, move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Me.
Thanks.
All right. The